Hello, I'm Helen. Hello, I'm Helen Gerhart with the Mon Valley Unemployed Committee, and I'm joined by Taylor Stesney and by Rosalind, a formerly misclassified worker who's going to be sharing some information about her own experience and the experience that she's heard from other people who are gig workers with app-based employment that have been misclassified as independent contractors. So I'm going to share a screen here really quickly, and we're just going to quickly review a few basic facts about misclassification, and then I'll be asking questions of Rosalind to share her firsthand experiences and those of others. So sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties here. All right, here we go. So in misclassification, part one, a few weeks back, we talked about how hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvania employees are being misclassified as independent contractors and how that hurts those workers, the economy, and employers that compete fairly. So again, the costs and consequences of misclassification for workers include they have to pay the full cost of Social Security and Medicare taxes. They lose eligibility for state and federal unemployment compensation. They lose qualification for health insurance and workers' compensation insurance, covering treatment and benefits if they're injured on the job. They may not be paid minimum wage and overtime pay. They lose the protections of the National Labor Relations Act, which ensures workers' rights to form unions and bargain collectively. And they may lose training, support, and oversight that they require to perform their work to basic quality and safety standards. So the main things that determine whether or not a worker is an employee is if the employer exerts control over or direction over performance of services, or if the worker has not established their own business. So like Uber drivers didn't establish the Uber app, right? So those people are employees. So people are independent contractors only if they're entirely free from control or direction over their services, and if they established the trade, occupation, profession, or business. So most commonly, very commonly misclassified workers include construction workers, healthcare workers, truck drivers, janitors and cleaners, retail sales workers, security guards, restaurant, bar, and catering workers, landscape workers, customer service workers, call center workers, manicurists, and pedicurists. These are just a few of the most commonly misclassified. Today, we're going to be focusing on the experience of gig workers, people who usually perform their services through an online app. So we're now going to talk with Rosalind, who was formerly misclassified. Rosalind, do you want to join us again? Great.
Hello, Helen.
So Rosalind, would you tell me just a little bit about your circumstances when you decided to sign up as a gig worker?
Um, my regular employment, career employment, my job was eliminated, and so I worked for a small nonprofit. that was not able to provide severance. So in addition to my savings and all of that, I needed to make some extra income. I, of course, applied for unemployment, all of that, which does not suffice for anyone, I don't believe, to meet their needs. So I was looking to make some extra income, and a friend of mine, uh, actually a couple of months prior, had told me about this gig work. Uh, and that term I wasn't even familiar with. They weren't either. I only became familiar with the term once I had many trials and tribulations uh, in doing the work. But a friend of mine was telling me about an opportunity that they had come across that was allowing them to have some extra money for gas and things like that uh, to help out with the family. And so they were like, if you're looking, if you ever wanted some extra cash, you should do this. So I looked into it and I signed up. And right away at signing up, um, all of my paperwork was pre-filled that I was an independent contractor. I didn't know uh, anything about the fact that I actually was not, and no one in that circumstance is actually an independent contractor. But the employer, they pre-filled all the information with independent contractor language. Uh, so that's pretty much my beginning of my experience.
Right. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen to remind folks that it's a myth that if a worker signs an independent contractor agreement, then they must accept their misclassification and the loss of employee rights and benefits. So the fact is that signing such a contract doesn't make a worker an independent contractor. And employers that present such contracts as conditions for employment and yet exert significant control over work conditions are not acting in accord with the law. So Roslyn, um, what kinds of pressures, incentives, penalties, what kinds of pressures did your employer exert to control the way that you managed your services?
Well, it started from day one of signing up, uh, which you uh, start out through the app and then you have to go to a website. But after you do some things there, you go back to the app. But as I initially indicated, one of the things was pre-filling out my contractual information with independent contractor, quote unquote, language in there. So that was one thing. There wasn't an option or choice to change it or anything like that. And then it's an app based, so you have to download the app. I didn't create the app. It wasn't my idea. Um, they never consulted me about how I thought it was working or improvements that they should make or adjustments or anything. So it, it wasn't mine. And then in order to work in the app, you did have the ability to choose your work. They were called trips in my case, um, from what they allotted you, what they allowed you as a selection, which I had come to find later on that it varied from worker to worker, even if you're working in the same area. So you could select your work from maybe the 10 trips or 5 trips that they were offering you at the time, but you could not uh, indicate what you thought as an independent contractor, what you thought your minimum pay should be for that particular trip, or what your pay in general should be, um, for all that the trip would entail. Uh, Sometimes because in the app it allowed customers to put special instructions. So they may have special instructions of where they want to receive their delivery and what it all entailed. And a lot of things, in my estimation, were not just your basic services. They were above and beyond the normal, just common delivery service, which is what I was doing. And those types of things, in my estimation, should have a higher or an additional pay associated with it. So you had to accept whatever they had already predetermined that the rate for that particular trip, uh, you had to accept that, what was indicated. Also, uh, you had no say about tips. As a matter of fact, most of the times you did not know what your tip was unless the person physically tipped you, and some did in person, but most people did it in the app. And then the way the app worked that out is that they allowed the customer 24 hours to change the tip. So that change, and that's how they word it. But a lot of people don't have a tip in there right off. And so then they have a 24-hour period to add a tip or not add a tip. And I guess in these days and times, a lot of people are struggling. So a lot of tips uh, for myself and my cohorts that I would speak with there were not added, although we did get some.
I've heard from a a different company that you worked for. Uber will basically penalize workers if they don't accept all the trips that are offered to them. Was there anything like that with the employer you worked for?
Well, there sure was, but these things, mind you, none of the information that I've shared with you thus far was pre-explained. There wasn't a training that explained the process. The training was simply like a 2 or 3 minute YouTube video that, made it look all just glorious and grand. And um, it would have taken a much more extensive training to explain every step and every function within the app. So, as a gig worker, you were constantly learning something new about the app, and you would consult with your other gig workers to see if they figured that it worked the same or if they even knew how a particular uh, portion on the app or selection worked. So there was a lot of back and forth. Now, if you were someone that just chose not to communicate with anyone, you would be pretty much in the dark because you have to ask because you couldn't ask the company. There was no way, and the app was constantly changing. So to answer your question, the app penalized you, but it didn't say, there was no indication of, oh, because you only took 2 of the 10 trips that were offered, we're not going to offer you trips for the next 3 hours, or we're only going to offer you really bad trips, which are, trips that you're spending more in the gas mileage to get to and through than what the trip was paying. Uh, so the app had various ways, the algorithms in the app of penalizing the worker.
And were you able to manage the order that you would make your deliveries?
Oh, not at all. So sometimes in these quote unquote trips, uh, most of the times, but so I should say sometimes a trip would be just one trip where, you were picking up and you were dropping off. Most of the times there were multiple trips within an offer, and that's actually what it was called, an offer. There were multiple trips within an offer. Most of the time, as you're trying, so when you complete a trip and everything's app driven, and you figure out that they're looking at your time as well, how long it takes you to do it. They know, how long it should take you to get there, etc., because they want you to drive the way that they want you to drive. Uh, so if you they weren't taking into account traffic, they weren't taking into account construction. 9 times out of 10, I was in areas that I was very familiar with, so I knew there was a much shorter way to get to this street, this location, this house than what the app was telling me. Uh, but it wouldn't allow me to do that. And within those multiple trips in the offer, being familiar with the location, the you couldn't see all of the trips all the time, but sometimes you could because you're driving. You're driving and you're trying to manipulate this phone that there's been all kinds of campaigns nationally. Don't text and drive, don't do this, don't do that. So anyway, so you're driving and you have to work quickly because the offers only stay there for a short period of time for you to select. And then keep in mind, if you're not selecting them, then you're penalized because you're not getting any more offers for the next couple hours and etc. But yeah, it may, like the last trip may have been like just blocks or within a mile of the initial start location, but the app would have you go 20, 25 miles out the way first and deliver how it wanted you to. And at first I thought, oh, it's working me back to my initial location. That's why they're doing it that way. But that's not why, because within those other trips, you were zigzagging. You zigzag. You're going, you're coming, you're going. So there seemed to be no real methodology to it, and you were not able, even though there were multiple trips in there, you were not able to select how you wanted to do them or rearrange them, etc.
So did that mean that you paid a lot of extra money for gas?
Oh my gosh. Not only gas, well, mileage. So I would advise anyone that's interested in gig work, and I'm not saying it's bad, it works for a lot of people, uh, but you need to have a second hand car, not just a second car, because I don't think you really want to beat down your, nice regular car and put all of this extended mileage on there. Uh, yeah, lots of extended mileage. I had just gotten an oil change the week that I started, and my car is a newer vehicle. And so it talks to me and tells me various things. And so about a week and a half after I started doing the gig work, it told me that I needed an oil change. So I said, oh, there's a malfunction because I just had an oil change. And typically I don't need oil changes for like 3, 4 months or what have you. And in this vehicle, actually even longer because it's newer and how it goes. I went to the dealership and the dealership was like, everything's working fine. Yeah, you need an oil change. When was your last oil? Then they looked up with my last oil change. They were like, you were just here. Yes.
Mhm.
But I all of those miles had me in need of an oil change within another oil change within a week and a half, not even 2 good weeks.
So an independent contractor would have been able to manage how they deliver, how they geographically arrange their deliveries. They would have had full control. And
Full
it sounds
control.
like you did not.
Not at all.
Yep. So uh were you did the company offer any kind of reimbursement for mileage or gas?
Oh no. You were only paid what the payment for the trips were, and by the you know grace and mercy of someone offering a tip.
So if if you wanted to, let's say you met customers you thought were great, most independent contractors have lists of their customers. Did
Mhm.
you have lists of customers?
Oh, not at all. And I encountered that quite a bit where there were some wonderful, the world is made up of wonderful people, really. There were some wonderful people and a lot of elderly people who were dear to my heart, and people who I would have liked to have continued to service. And there were times, maybe over for the weeks that I did it, where I may have encountered the same person like a second time by happenstance. But no, the app did not allow you to retain any information, so you got to put the information in there, and then once because they're timing you, and so once you've can answered their few questions about the delivery location and that the delivery was completed, it disappears. You don't even know who tipped you and who didn't really. Uh, it was there was a tip portion on there that you could go in and see, but it wasn't populated with client names. It was like a 26 character number associated with it that was not like different just at the beginning and the last 18 numbers were the same, or different at the end and the first 15 numbers were the same. So you could home in, oh, okay, I know these last 4 digits, that must be this trip or that. No, the number was just a random number. And you just try to put it together in your mind.
So there were also, as I understand it, gig workers often have to have some heavy loads.
Hmm.
And as an independent contractor, they would be able to choose what loads that they wanted to deliver. Did you have any choice over your the types of loads you had to take?
Not at all. And again, keep in mind, most of the times, uh, when you're out there and especially if you're out there working and accepting trips, then the app is, it's sending you things pretty frequently. And then the times of the day um, that can be busy. So most of the times you're driving. So when you finish a delivery, it's not as though you can pull over to the side somewhere safe and, okay, now let me see what's next. Because the trip or the offers, they would only be available to select for like a short period of time. I'm talking like a minute, like 60 seconds, literally. Or sometimes it might be 90 seconds. Um, then on a rare occasion, they may tell you you have 3 minutes to accept an offer. And then this brings up also there was something called a round robin. So the and those were trips that they appeared a slightly different way, and they had a little clock assigned to that particular trip. And if you did not accept it, because the clock was usually on like a seconds, so 60 or 90 seconds, something like that. And if you did not accept that, now there may be other trips and you might want something else. But if you did, I learned if you did not accept the round robin trips, it counted against you in your stats. And it made it look as though you were not being as productive as you were being, even though you were accepting other trips and not the round robin. And so it was once I kind of figured out what was going on with that, then I learned that other people, even YouTubers, because I got a lot of information from YouTube, advise uh, accept every single round robin trip. That's how you keep your stats up. And you have to keep your stats up if you want to continue to receive trips, or you will just be out there for a wasted period of time, wasted your gas to get to the starting location, and you may have you might be working a job, another job, and this is just, like I was trying to have just additional income till my next job. You only have a certain period of time where you're working. So you may want to work 3 hours or 4 hours, and you're out there that whole time and you get not one trip, not one, if your stats were not kept up to par. So there were just a lot of tricks and uh, i- indications that were going on uh, that more than screamed, I'm being controlled by this app and the owners of it.
Yes. So you had worked as a nonprofit employee for years. You had paid into unemployment compensation system along with millions of other Pennsylvania workers. Um, when you put into the UC system that you had been working as a gig worker, as an independent contractor, what happened to the unemployment
Well,
compensation claim you had filed earlier?
so initially, right after my job was eliminated, uh, I got unemployment uh, pretty quickly uh, than most. So after the waiting week, I think it was about maybe 2 weeks, and I received my first payment. But it was after I received the first payment when I also started this gig work because I didn't want to spend all my savings. And when you're, so the unemployment system tells you, or it asks you, if you work, were you able and available for work? And it asks you if you worked a job that particular week that you're claiming, etc. And, I'm being honest, yeah, okay, I worked. And then it'll ask you details about the work. And when you put in independent contractor, then that tells you, you're self-employed. And there's nowhere that tells you initially in the unemployment system that if you're an independent contractor, i.e., self-employed, that disqualifies you for unemployment. But I figured that there was something wrong because after I answered those questions and I put in what I had made, which was not much for a week, the system was taking a very long time and just thinking and thinking and thinking. And it was nothing to do with the connection or anything like that. And I knew it with every fiber of my being. I said, uh-oh, there's a problem. I probably shouldn't do that anymore, meaning the gig work. And what happened is they told me instead of, okay, your claim has been processed, you can expect to be paid on this day, it said, okay, your claim is under review. And it remained under review for like 3, almost 4 weeks, even when I was trying to contact unemployment to see what's going on. We know, and especially uh, at that time, it was horrific getting through to anyone if you even got through. And then they didn't have any answers. They couldn't answer. So I continued to do the work because I hadn't found another job yet. And again, I didn't want to deplete my savings. And then they came back after that 3 to almost 4 week period saying that I did not qualify. I no longer qualified for unemployment because I was self-employed. So the benefits
So,
stopped.
um, so when someone is in that position, when someone has been misclassified as an independent contractor has applied for UC, they can, and they're denied, they receive a determination that they're not eligible, they can definitely appeal that
Mhm.
decision. You can also, from the very beginning, share information that may help prevent the determination. But the truth is that the UC system is having a difficult time with people who are in this gray area who have been misclassified. And there are so many hundreds of thousands of people that simply don't apply for UC if they become separated from a gig platform. So that's something that we are working with many advocates and working with the Department of Labor and Industry to try to figure out how to develop better questions and information. But I'm going to share my
Mhm.
screen again, and here are things that you can do in the initial application. And you can also gather this type of information for appeal hearings. So this question over here on the right is going to come up. Are you self-employed or the owner or operator of a business or farm? Just answer no. And everywhere in the claim application where there's a question regarding your self-employment, definitely answer no. But then you can provide additional information and evidence that you did not establish the business that you're working for, that you don't own the tools, equipment, the technology, or the app needed to perform the work. You use the app, but you don't own it. You didn't create it. And you can detail how your employer exercises significant control over your work conditions or how they manage your services. So as Rosalind was talking about, just laying out how she could not manage the order, the geographic order in which she made her deliveries. That would be very convincing evidence that control is being exerted. So opportunities include questions on the online UC claim application, verbal interviews. If the UC Service Center calls you and asks you questions, make sure to explain these three things and the evidence of these three things. There are often fact-finding forms that claimants will receive after filing the claim. And make sure to put in as much detail in those fact-finding forms about the exertion of control over your services as possible. And then you can also send emails to uchelp@pa.gov. And then finally, if you receive a determination that you are not eligible because you are supposedly an independent contractor, when you go to an appeal hearing, create a timeline of basic events, including the way that the job was described to you before you took it, because it's it's misinformation to describe those jobs as independent contractor jobs. Explain that you were given a contract that labeled you as an independent contractor and you did not know that you were not. And explain then, how you saw that control exerted. So appeal hearings are usually in person. And if you're given a choice of a telephone hearing or an in-person hearing, we strongly suggest in-person hearings, because when you can look directly, at the referee that's asking you these questions, that your evidence tends to be far more convincing. And the employer, especially for these big gig companies, may request a telephone hearing. You can assert your right to an in-person hearing. So the employer can take part by phone, but you can be in the room with the referee to present your evidence. While you are working for such platforms, definitely take screenshots, your financial information, the wages and tips that you're making. Many of these employers are not reporting themselves as employers, and so they are not in the drop-down menu of employers in the UC application. But you can show the wages, the kinds of income that you are making with this app. Once you separate from such an employer, you often lose access to all of that. So try to make sure to get those photos or screenshots or download any information you can from the platform before your separation or just after your separation. Another really difficult thing about gig work is, let's say you've been working for a gig platform. I'm going to use the example of Uber. And your car conks out, or you have an accident and you can't work for 2 or 3 weeks. Under the current UC system, that counts as a separation from the employer, even if you're going to be going back to work for Uber within a few weeks. So every time you stop using the app counts as a separation, which you have to report. So keep that in mind as well. Make sure that if you are using any of these gig apps, you're constantly downloading and saving and documenting your work, your hours, your income, and wherever possible, take screenshots of the ways in which the app is exerting control over your services. So, Rosalind, is there anything else that you would like to share before we take questions from the audience?
So just that, and this is not necessarily pertaining to just gig workers, but for people who, like myself, were who had a lack of knowledge, we'll term it that way, about the UC system. There are tons of folks like myself that had never been on unemployment and didn't know the ropes and how it works. So, and I'm a reader, and I read everything. I read their little handbook and everything, and I didn't see anything in that handbook that said, although I had an approved claim from, as you indicated earlier, the years that I had paid into this system, I had an approved claim, and then they tell you you can make it's like $100 or a little over $100 more than what your weekly benefit rate is, and still receive your weekly benefit rate. And if you make over that with another job or part-time job or what have you, then they simply deduct the overage. But with they do not clearly anyway indicate is that if you take another job, whether it's part-time, uh, uh, just very, very extremely part-time, like some folks may do gig work or what have you. But the system, when you're reporting that, the system it receives that as your new job. And so your past job that you had all these wonderful credit weeks and you had a high financial determination because of those credit weeks and what your pay was and everything, that all goes out the door. And it's based upon this new job you may have taken. It was the holidays. It was Christmas, 5 days before Christmas. Imagine that, losing your job. But anyway, uh, so I only had like one or two pays that were still going to come to me because again, they couldn't afford a severance or anything. Uh, so, you may do something. Lots of people take part-time work for the holidays and things like that. You have to be very careful when you're dealing with the unemployment system. And even though you may be stressed and, there's a lot of emotions when your job ends, however it ends, a lot of emotions surrounded by that, but you want to take your time and think and utilize organizations like us, the Mon Valley Unemployed Committee, to assist you, even though you think you may be okay, because I wasn't okay. My
Thank you
benefits
so,
ended.
thank you so much, Rosalind. So I'm happy to report that you won an appeal once you'd presented all your
Yeah,
information
yeah,
about the
months
ways that
later.
you're, yes, but those months, when you're trying, especially for folks that have been living for paycheck to paycheck, people who don't have savings, that long wait can often be really disastrous.
Hmm.
Um, and you can ask for escalation of the review of your case by sending information. Like if you're facing, let's say, because you didn't receive your UC, you didn't receive the money you were going to pay rent with, right? If you're facing eviction or if you have bills that show that you're not able to pay your utilities, you can definitely send those to the unemployment compensation system through email, uchelp@pa.gov. And I'm going to put that in the chat. Or actually, Taylor, if you could put that in the Facebook chat. And you can keep calling the service center. You can set up an appointment for an in-person meeting as well. But do everything that you can to communicate with evidence that you're facing financial hardship, and that can often lead to escalation or quicker review of your case. Oh, right. I saw there was a question from Jordan Romanis. What do I do if I've been misclassified and have been denied unemployment? And so I'm going to share my screen, and there's a number of things you can do. So this is beyond just communicating with the unemployment compensation system, the UC service center, or your referee. You can contact the PA Office of the Attorney General. And there is this email here, wage theft at attorneygeneral.gov. You can call Employer Tax Services, and the number is here. And Taylor, if you're able, if you could take this information and put it in the Facebook comments so that people will have access to it after this, that'd be great. You can contact the Bureau of Labor Law Compliance through this number. If you live in Philadelphia, Philadelphia Legal Assistance can actually help taxpayers challenge their misclassification before the IRS. And then we are working with groups from across the state to try to develop legislative fixes, new laws that could make sure that protections for workers are extended, that there are more options for workers who are facing misclassification. So if you share your experiences, we not only can help guide you to address your own particular case, this can really help with advocacy at the state level for better laws. So here at the bottom, there is this Google form where you can share your own experience of being misclassified. You can do so anonymously if you need to. And we will reach out to you as soon as possible if you fill out this form, and we can hopefully provide some resources to help you get through your situation. So are there any other questions from folks out there? All right. So okay, Taylor says there are no more questions. So thank you all so much. We're going to be sharing links to this presentation in the future, so you can always refer to this information. And please do, if you see this presentation and you have questions, you can also put, you can comment and just let us know how we can help. So thank you. All right. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.